Chapter 8, Lesson 4, The Road to War. What to know? How did the colonists prepare for war with Britain? Explain the significance of the Second Continental Congress. Understand the importance of the Battle of Bunker Hill. You are there. Today, the Second Continental Congress is meeting in Philadelphia. You and many others are waiting in the streets for news about the meeting, when several men walk by, talking hurriedly. A woman nearby nudges your shoulder. "Look, that's George Washington," she whispers. "Some people say he'll lead us against the British." You crane your neck, trying to see what Washington looks like. You wonder what kind of person would take on the powerful British Army. And there's a young George Washington, led the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. The Assembly Room at Independence Hall is where the Second Continental Congress met. The Second Continental Congress. 1775, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. News of the fighting at Lexington and Concord spread quickly throughout the colonies. As a result, the Second Continental Congress was called to meet in Philadelphia on May 10, 1775. Colonial leaders gathered at the Pennsylvania State House to decide what the colony should do. Only Georgia did not send representatives. The delegates were divided in their views. Some called for war against the British. Others, such as John Dickinson, tried to persuade the group to avoid fighting. By June, however, Congress had agreed that the colonies should at least prepare for war. The first step was to form an army. The Continental Army, as it came to be called, was the first united colonial army in the 13 colonies. It was made up of full-time soldiers, unlike the part-time militias that each colony already had. George Washington was chosen to be the Army's commander-in-chief, the leader of all the military forces. John Adams, a delegate from Massachusetts, suggested Washington partly because he had fought in the French and Indian War. To supply the Continental Army, Congress asked each colony to contribute money to pay for guns, food, and uniforms. Congress also decided to print its own money, its own paper money, which came to be known as Continental currency. Congress paid the soldiers in bills called Continentals. Reading check. What caused Congress to form an army? The Battle of Bunker Hill. The Battle of Bunker Hill. By the time George Washington was chosen to lead the Continental Army, the first major battle of the Revolutionary War had already been fought. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place near Boston on June 17, 1775. After sunset on June 16, colonial commanders Israel Putnam and William Prescott had arrived at Breed's Hill, across the Charles River from Boston. They ordered their soldiers to build earthworks, or walls made of earth and stone. When British General Thomas Gage learned of this the next morning, he sent General William Howe and 2,400 British soldiers to capture Breed's Hill. Shortly after noon, these soldiers began marching up the hill to the roll of drums. When the British drew close, the 1,600 colonists, 1,600 colonists, inside the earthworks let loose with a deadly hail of shooting. To save bullets, Colonial Commander Putnam said to his own soldiers, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Fighting on the hill was much fiercer than the British had expected. Twice they were forced back toward the river. One of the many soldiers who fought bravely at the earthworks was Peter Salem, a free African American. Sailor wounded a British leader. In Boston, thousands of people climbed to the rooftops to view the fighting. Bunker Hill. And where did the fighting actually take place? Breed's Hill. In Boston, thousands of people climbed to the rooftops to view the fighting across the river. They watched in horror as the nearby city of Charleston was hit and set afire by cannons shooting from British ships in the harbor. Back on Breed's Hill, the colonists were running out of ammo, and had to retreat from their earthworks. By early evening, the British had captured Breed's Hill. More than 1,000 British soldiers and about 350 colonists had been killed or wounded. The battle at Breed's Hill was misnamed for nearby Bunker Hill. Although the colonists lost the battle, they had fought bravely. The British had learned that fighting the colonists would not be easy. The Second Continental Congress, hoping to avoid more fighting, sent another petition to King George III. This petition, sent on July 5, 1775, came to be known as the Olive Branch Petition because it asked for peace. An olive branch is an ancient symbol of peace. And if you look at this map, we have Breed's Hill, Bunker Hill. Here's the British forces. Here's the colonial forces and their earthworks. And notice the British ships. And here's Charleston, which was under fire. By the time the Olive Branch Petition reached London, it could do little good. The Battle of Bunker Hill had further angered British soldiers who advised King George III to get tougher with the colonists. On August 23rd, the king sent a proclamation promising to use every possible way to crush the rebellion. As a start, the king began to send more troops to the colonies. What caused the colonists to abandon Breed's Hill? Summary. The Second Continental Congress formed the Continental Army and made George Washington the commander-in-chief. By that time, the first major battle of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Bunker Hill, had been fought. The British prepared to fight the colonists. How did the colonists prepare for war with Britain? Why did British leaders advise King George III? What did British leaders advise King George III to do after the Battle of Bunker Hill? Why do you think the colonists were proud of the Battle of Bunker Hill, even though they lost? Think about cause and effect. Because of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, King George III promises to crush the colonial rebellion because of Phyllis Wheatley. Quote, "A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine, with gold unfading, Washington, be thine." Patriots are sometimes best able to express their feelings in poems, stories, or songs. Phyllis Wheatley was such a patriot. Wheatley was not born in the 13 colonies, but she became a patriot in her new home. Wheatley was born in Africa and kidnapped by slave traders when she was about 8 years old. She was sold to a Boston family named Wheatley, who gave her the name by which she is now known. One day, family members saw her trying to write on a wall with a piece of chalk, so they helped her learn to read and write. As a result, Wheatley began writing poetry as a teenager. Wheatley's poetry was first published in 1770, and it became well known throughout the colonies and in England. She was the first African American woman in the colonies to have her writing work, published. In 1775, Wheatley wrote a poem honoring George Washington for being named Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army.